Hello, hello. Welcome to season 5 of Lead Your Life with Debbie Heiser. My name is Debbie Heiser, and I help entrepreneurs make a lot of money doing what they love without sacrificing what's important to them. I see way too many business people letting their businesses or their jobs run their lives versus them figuring out with real clarity about what they want their lives to look like and having their job or their business be the conduit to have that life that they absolutely love. I want to thank you so much for listening in to season 5. This season is filled with motivation, inspiration, leadership, and wisdom from some super interesting guests, and myself included. My hope is through our shared experiences, you will see a bit of yourself and move further into leading your own lit up life. If you're enjoying this podcast, please feel free to share with others and leave a rating, and a comment or two would be awesome too. Let's get going. Thanks again for being a part of our community.
Straight from the corners of my mind is where I find my sanity.
Hello, and welcome back to another episode of Lead Your Life with Debbie Heiser. I am here today with Ryan and Heidi Sawyer, and I know I say I'm really excited every time I do a podcast, but I really am excited this time. And I want to tell you a little bit about how I know Ryan and Heidi. Heidi and actually our good friend Misty came to my house one time and we did our own little mastermind retreat. And I met Heidi, I think at an event that maybe that Misty and I did, but we go back quite a few years. It's so funny now. I'm always like pre-COVID, after COVID, but way before COVID hit and everything else that has happened in the last few years. And then I met Ryan because they came over and stayed in Sandpoint. We all went out to dinner with their beautiful family. And it's been, I have to say, from being on this side, kind of following you on social media and occasionally touching base, watching the progression of what the two of you have been up to over the last 5 or 6 years has been really inspiring, which is why I wanted to have you on the podcast today. Because when we talk about leading our lit up lives, one of the things is about how do we have the and more. And what I mean by that is Ryan and Heidi also own a painting company. And they've also, that's an important component to what they do, but they also have stepped into this other avenue that to me just feels like it's in such congruency with who you are and what you were made for in the world. So I'm going to open it up to you. Let the two of you introduce yourselves, and then we'll just have a conversation.
Well, thank you for having us, first of all.
Yeah, thank you.
Absolutely.
We're excited to be here. So I'll do the introduction, I guess, to fire us off here. We are a family that has recognized the importance years ago when coming from my past life, I like to say, of used to be a collegiate football coach. And then the next thing that I kind of took on was to build this residential painting company because, I needed I needed income and I didn't really know what else I wanted to do with my life. And I was really working on myself, right? Because I was overcoming a very dark aspect of my life. I was in very deep depression and anxiety and panic attacks and these things, and wanting to uncover what was going on. And so I knew how to paint. So I was like, hey, if I go roll some walls and whatever, was just a natural progression for me. And so that naturally led us into this, where we are currently at in life, where we're podcasting, we're coaching, we're writing another book together right now and doing
I can't wait.
Yeah. So it might be a while. I'm just saying it's a big project,
Okay.
but it was one where we just naturally kind of found ourselves, going through different coaching certifications and doing different things like that, because we wanted to continue to evolve and grow individually and as a couple and as a family. Right. And so that was the birth of everything we've done. I was just telling somebody this morning, actually, who is one of our clients, who is kind of starting to toy with the idea of wanting to coach people. And I said, well, at some point, if you are serious about your own growth and evolution, then you're going to have to turn around and teach it. The only way you know that you really know something and integrate it fully into your life is that you're able to present it to others and teach it, right? And so that was my motivation. It was kind of selfish. It was like, well, I want to keep growing, so I better put myself in a place and in an environment where, number one, I'm able to teach it, and number two, talk about holding yourself accountable, right, to your own growth, is that now I have to show up for other people and I have to stay a step ahead right? Like I'm putting myself in that environment where I have people who are on this path, they're growing, they're learning, they're evolving. And I want to be always being able to bring something new and different to them, right? So that's been the natural evolution. And then to integrate that into our residential painting company in a way that feeds into their lives and gives them an environment that is uncommon in that world as well. Like tomorrow, ironically, we're having this conversation. Tomorrow, I'm doing a full day of mindfulness training for my 8 employees for Sawyer's Painting too, right?
Oh, that's fantastic. Yeah.
So that's a little bit of just kind of who we are as a family, like just wanting to be an impact-oriented family and doing this work to be able to, have our own growth and our own transformations and to evolve, but also knowing like the important component of that is to create an environment for others to do the same.
Yeah. And we also want to honor and celebrate that is different for everyone. I was the person in the relationship who saw this transformation happening in him. And I was like, well, you know what? I'm not really depressed, so I don't need to do anything. Right.
Yeah.
No, that's not the case. We all need to work on ourselves and continue to grow and heal. But that looks differently for everyone. And so I think that's an important, note to make, that we're all on our own paths, and we really want to honor that for other people too.
Yeah, Heidi, that's I want to stop there for a minute and talk about that, because that's such an important key component that I don't know. Well, I know you feel this way because you just talked about it, but to me, what I see is all of this comparison happening. I need to be on the same track as this person, and all these coaches out there saying, I've got like the next best thing since sliced bread, and you follow this exact process and you're going to be blah, 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 blah. Right now, as business owners and as a coach, in order to be scalable, you have to have a little bit of a framework, right? But then being able to customize that to someone, what turns you on to understanding that? Because some people, that takes a long time for them to get.
Mm-hmm. Well, for myself, it was just my personal experience of seeing, like I said, Ryan's growth and where he was at, and feeling that comparison. Oh man, he's going to leave me in the dust here. He's reading all these books and practicing meditation and doing all these things. And just recognizing that I can have my own growth and that can look different, and where it's led us now to come together to be actually coaching and teaching the same material. That took us a lot of years to get there. But I think it's all in divine order. It all happens in the way that it's supposed to, because it's unfolding the next step to where we need to be individually to get there.
Yeah. And I have a question for both of you, but a slightly different angle. So I have some clients sometimes that are really afraid of the universal law of sacrifice, right? And the fact that sometimes you have to let go of the lesser in order to rise to the higher. So we get nervous about this word sacrifice, but what happens is a lot of times they get nervous because as they start to shift, their spouse or loved ones sometimes don't like it, right? And it can create conflict, but 9 times out of 10, the other person will shift with them. And that's what I hear you saying. So was there something, like, did you go through that period where at first you're like, okay, stop? Or were you irritated enough at the beginning that you're like, something has to change, and you were happy for the change? Like, walk me through a little bit of that, if you don't mind. I'm kind of digging in.
I'll let you explain that a little bit from your perspective of what was happening there.
You just described the number one topic that we like to uncover is the idea of letting go, right? And how that raises us up in a level of consciousness, awareness, perspective, abilities, all the things, joy, love, peace, the whole thing, what we all want, freedom, right? And so I was uncovering all those pieces and I was experiencing that. And here's the thing that we came to realize is because I'm on this path and I'm going like, come on, hop on with me. Come on. The water's fine. Jump on in.
Yeah.
We weren't putting ice in tubs at this time yet, just yet, right?
We're going to go to that.
Yeah, but I came to a place of realizing my journey has nothing to do with her.
Yeah.
Absolutely nothing. Right. So what we practice and what we teach is specific mindset and tools and practices and principles that turn into skills. Right. And how she turns those into skills has nothing to do with me and it's none of my business. And when I was able to really hone in and focus on what was happening inside of me, and this is where the environment of growth came in for us, was once I created that safe place inside of me, it opened the door for her to do it her way, because I was no longer shaming, projecting, shoulda, coulda, woulda, any of that. And I was just in my domain, doing my thing for me and for my family the best way I knew how, and holding space, right?
Yeah.
And letting it unfold naturally and organically for her.
And that was the best thing you could have done, because everybody knows I'm a rebel. So if you try to tell me what to do, I'm probably going to color outside the lines.
Well, there's resistance to
well,
sacrifice, right?
Yeah.
The only thing I would say
Absolutely.
is that the price of the new life is the old one. The price.
Oh, so true.
Yeah, you don't get to go back.
You know, and so
Nor why would you want to?
right. And our egos are, whether we're letting go or whether we're going to have to transform in the sense of our relationship and how we connect, our egos are always going to try to hold on to what's familiar. And that's it. Right.
Yeah. That well-beaten path, right? And it's layers. We've never arrived. Like we'll never like arrive. It's just constant layers, right? That we continue to go off. And so thank you for sharing that, because I find a lot of times in relationships, well, and we live in a society, honestly, that kind of pushes this idea of codependency and looking externally for someone else to fill the needs that we have internally. And so, and nothing's worse. I've done it. Ask me how I know, right? Where I go through some experience, like you were talking about, Ryan, and you're like, oh, here, come with me and let me pull you along. You're broken. You need this too, right?
I got your solution.
Yeah. And who wants to hear that? And so I love that idea too, of when you open up and provide space for someone else to just be who they are and love them unconditionally, right? Because otherwise, when you're saying something, you need to do this, in our excitement sometimes, well, I'm going to speak for myself. In my excitement as an extrovert and a constant learner, I'm constantly talking about things that I've learned, not to persuade other people to do it, but it's interesting because when you do that and you try to get someone else to do your work, it doesn't work.
Right. Well, and that's what you're doing when you're trying to bring somebody along and trying to get somebody else to do the work that you need to do. When you say do your work, do you mean like do the same work that you're doing, or do your internal work, meaning like heal and evolve and let go yourself? Because what I'm seeing her that she needs to do, and why don't you do this, and right, try this meditation or whatever, like that's me wanting her to be a certain way so I feel better about me, or it's easier for me to feel safe and secure in my own skin, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. And it goes back to my new favorite, like coach crush is Peter Crone. And he's made this statement that has really stuck with me. And I hear this a lot, and I'm hearing you say this in a little bit different way, that when we look to someone else and say, you need to be this way, it doesn't work. And what happens is we go back into that mold of wanting to be perfect. And perfectionism is just a context to say something's wrong with me. And then what he says is, relax, nothing's wrong with you. Right. Like, because we build this, oh, we have to be perfect for this person, versus I'm holding space for you to be who you are and love you regardless of where you're at.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And that's a beautiful thing. Yeah. So tell me, like, as you've been doing this work, what I'm trying to figure out how I'm going to do this. So if your kids ever listen to this, that you're not like,
oh, it's okay.
We don't shelter anything from them. So go.
Okay. Well, and I guess what I meant by that is I'm going to ask you about them, right? So when you look at how the two of you have shifted over the last 6 years or so, right, and gone through this process, what kind of changes have you seen in your children? And because how old are they now? Good night.
9 and 10. Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. So what kind of changes have you seen even happening with them, as you all have then also allowed space for them to grow, but also being the parent, helping them and guiding them?
Yeah, I think our kids are our greatest teachers, because they are perfect little mirrors of showing us all of the work that we have to do, because everything that shows up in our kids that triggers us as parents, or that we see wanting something to be different or wanting them to behave differently, is all stuff that's coming from our own internal domain, right? It's coming from the environment. We're influencing them with our energy, with what's going on inside, whether you think you're really good at hiding it or not. You're not. You're not
Yeah,
good
they're
at
way
hiding
smarter than we give them credit for.
Exactly. So in the beginning, I noticed some things showing up with my daughter. A lot of my work has been with myself around perfectionism and body image issues and things of that nature. As I continue to heal myself in that aspect, even to the point where I'll even share this publicly. I had made some decisions earlier in my life, almost 20 years ago, to have breast augmentation. And I'm to the point now where I'm scheduling the reversal of that, the removal of that, because it just is so misaligned with who I am now. And no judgment for people who make that choice, but it's just not in alignment with where I'm going. And so as I continue to make these decisions that are in alignment with the truth of who I am, and I deepen in that, I see that change in my daughter, and I see her accepting herself more. And I see her, looking in the mirror and liking what she sees, and just feeling proud of herself and feeling empowered to be herself. And I hear a lot of things from both of our kids about not really wanting to do what everybody else is doing just to fit in or be cool, that they really understand who they are and what their values are and want to live from that place. And so those are some of the big changes that I've seen. Yeah.
I mean, I'll give you a quick answer. This is a practice that we have, and it's a model that we use, is don't tell them, show them. We did a podcast with a neuroscience specialist by the name of Stephanie Fay, who helped us write our program. And one of the things that we learned very quickly is just how humans learn is one of the things that we unpacked with her quite deeply. And so we recognize that whenever something's showing up, whether Haley's kind of judging her, how she felt or looked in her body at the time at 8 or 9 years old, or my son was being a little flighty, or whatever's happening there, is like, oh, we instantly turn to each other and be like, how's that showing up for you? Mm-hmm. And so that's what we do. How's that showing up for you? Or how has it? And a lot of times it's unconscious, but we're able to uncover it, and we're able to use that to work with that for our own healing. And then we recognize very quickly when we make that internal shift ourselves, and we rework that, and we then take an authentic action towards the new version of ourselves, it instantly corrects it with our children. And rather than trying to change something about their, we need to get them in sports, or we need to change what they're doing with this. Like, no. The model is you. And that's this idea of self-leadership that you speak of, right? And this idea of creating this environment of growth. Look around, see what you don't like, change it inside yourself, be the change you want to see in the world. And that's it.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And what a simple, I didn't say easy, but what a simple and profound tool.
Yeah.
Right. In any relationship, or as you see things, because I would say wait until you have grandchildren too, because then you have double mirrors.
Right. There's 2 of them.
Right. And you see these things, but it's integrated then too with like my daughter-in-law, right, and her things. But it's interesting how children, what I found is they do teach us. And I say to parents too, for me, it felt like from the moment my son was born, it's a lesson in letting go.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Right. And it continues to be a lesson in letting go and trust and going forward. So tell me too, I've been watching from afar. I want to get into these cold baths, but I want to find out first, you've been doing a lot of things with youth. So tell us a little bit about, because we didn't really say integrated human performance. That's the name of your coaching business.
That's the overall arching business, right? And there's all kinds of things underneath that. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So tell us, like, the 2 of you, and I know you have another coach that helps you, but like when you do these things, I know I look at your posts, and I wish I lived closer to go do the sunrise hike up the hill. But leaving my house and driving 90 minutes to do the sunrise is a little too much for me, but I might join you virtually someday. But when you think about, like, just explain to people that are listening, like some of the things that you offer people and what made you go down that road. Because when you think about coaching, there's all sorts of different avenues we can go, right? Mm-hmm. Why did you choose what you chose?
Do you mind if I take this one?
Yeah.
Okay. So, obviously my background working with college age kids when I was a collegiate football coach. So it was a natural progression for me to want to work with youth for a couple of reasons. Number one, I just can speak right to them and through them.
Yeah.
Right. So that's one thing. My voice just pierces right through them. And so they listen and I can capture them very, very well. So that's one piece. The other piece was, man, as I learned all of this over the course of the last, decade that I've been doing this real personal development type work, and everything we've unpacked is like, I would give anything to go back and talk to my 13, 14, 15-year-old self and teach them just a sliver of what I now know. And I remember reaching out for help when I was 17, when I was 22, when I was 25, because I was in those tight spots, even all the way back then. I remember 13 is when it started, of anxiety and having a hard time eating and keeping things down and I mean, all kinds of things. Right. And so if I could go back and give them just a perception shift at all, right, that what would be the ripple effect of that? Right. And so that became my like passion project more than anything. But then what was interesting was, as I wrote the program with a teenager in mind, but then I realized, oh, this is probably more for a leader, right? This is for a parent. This is for someone who wants to learn how to lead their own life. Because once we learn the science behind understanding human development and how humans learn, like I can try to pierce into a 13-year-old all I want, but if I don't impact their environment, like it's just going to fall flat, right? So that's how it really unfolded for us. Was my number one motivation was to have answers in case my son or daughter ever struggled the way I did. I wanted to have answers because I went to collegiate professors, my dad, whoever, all these different people to try to find answers, and no one had answers for me. The best answer I got was try counting to 10. I'm like, I would get to 2 and rip your head off for telling me that, right? That's just not, that's not the tool I'm looking for. Like, I want to understand the human experience so I can make it seem common and normal, and we can relate and we can have compassion and we can shift it, right? Rather than just trying to deal with it. Yeah. So it was to get that back to that age group where I remember my journey of suffering starting. And then it was recognizing, oh no, their parents need it, if not more than they do. And so, or leaders, corporate or otherwise, need it. And so that's how the natural progression began, right? And so we teach these principles and concepts and philosophy, really. The program for adults is called Integrated Mindset, this idea of learning how to integrate the inner and the outer world. That's as simple as I can put it. And then the Competitive Edge program that we do for sports teams, we just finished with a swim team that's from Spokane Valley area. And that is a 5-week course that is teaching the same basic concepts and tools, but in a very simplistic way. And really, when we talk about competitive edge, we're not talking about being better at competing against anybody other than ourselves, and legitimately taking our life from a layer of competition that comes from lack and not enough, right? All competition is a primal aspect that we don't think we're enough. So we have to overcome not being enough to prove that we are enough. Look, I accomplished, I beat you, I'm better than you, now I'm enough, right? That's all competition comes from, is legitimately getting these kids to come from a place of competition to cooperation with themselves. So they are no longer trying to win the game or achieve a certain status or role or outcome to try to feel okay, right? We flip the model, we flip it upside down, and we're going to come to the world from the top down, meaning that the end's already complete, and the inside out, that you're enough. Now, how can you come to the world being whole, complete, and worthy?
Yeah, that's great. Which then helps them in the competitive, like they're not so focused on the competitive, because we tend to focus on things, and then that is what creates the anxiety, the depression, the the nervousness and everything that goes along with that. So
they're able to release the attachment to the outcome being a certain way for them to be okay, which then allows them to, what we say, find your center. And that's where they perform at their highest. So it actually increases their performance drastically by learning how to come to the world from a completely backwards orientation that we're kind of just normally programmed and conditioned into, from social media to news to sports to, how everybody just thinks it's, being competitive is good and being
Yeah.
tough, and what toughness they think
Yeah.
toughness is, right? And
We're
toughness.
not stepping into our personal power. And when you step into your personal power, that makes a huge difference. You made me think of, I think it was the Happiness Lab podcast, which I love. And they were talking about this phenomenon with Olympians and how there's the highest level of depression and suicide with silver medalists.
Interesting.
The bronze medalists, they're just happy they made it on the podium. The gold medalist is super happy because they got the gold, but the silver is thinking, I didn't do enough. Right.
I was so
Yeah,
close.
which is really a phenomenon.
Interesting.
Yeah. We've seen,
and here they're the second in the world, right? Come on.
Yeah. We've seen such beautiful connection in these groups with the teens and specifically these sports teams.
Yeah.
And just really, like Ryan said, normalizing the human experience, normalizing what's going on, inside your head, inside your body, what's happening, helping them to kind of identify with more of the truth of what matters and who they are than all of these outside labels and rules and things that are kind of imposed on us by our culture. And so it's been really powerful just to see the sharing and the connection. I was really surprised by that when we started doing this, that people in that age group were so ready, this generation, they're so ready to have these powerful conversations and talk about, what is my personal standard and why am I here and
who am I?
Who am I? And really powerful, deep stuff that made us also want to work with their parents, and create that environment of growth for everybody. It's really cool.
Absolutely. And you make me think of, so I don't know if you all knew this, I was a youth pastor where I was an executive at Citibank for 9 years. And I have to say those high school students were so much deeper, like the conversations, like they're seekers. They're trying to figure out, where's my place in the world?
Yeah.
And in the process, they want to go deep. They want to understand. It's not all surface level. So yeah, that's good to hear. Okay, so I want to talk about these ice baths. So tell me, what prompted you? Because I know you guys have done, they're not Ironman, but you've done this Navy SEAL thing, and I'm totally debauching it here, but you've done these things, and I think, didn't your son just do one with you too?
Yes.
Which is so amazing to me. So tell me a little bit about too, because the physical, the mental, the heart, the soul, all of that is integrated, right? Which is your word. And so when you look at that, tell us what prompted you to go down that path and do some of those, for the lack of a better word, you can correct me, camps that you went to.
Sure.
And then I love watching the videos of you guys getting into the pictures too of the really cold baths. And like I mentioned before we started, I try to turn my shower on cold. I'm not always successful with it. One of these days I will get there. But
try lukewarm.
Talk about that.
Try lukewarm first. That's it's
I did, and I've been slowly turning it. Yeah,
that's right. That's incremental shifts to get us to where we're going. Well, on our path the last decade or so, one of the things that I have been relentless with is trying to figure out who's the best in the world at what they do.
Yeah.
Right. And so when I was like, okay, the next thing for me to really uncover and study is mental toughness and resiliency, right? And learning how to train our minds towards specific outcomes, visualization, these different tools that I was really, and understanding how to bring it all together in an integrated way. Where I landed was Mark Divine and Unbeatable Mind. And I thought, who better to teach me these skills of mind training than a former Navy SEAL commander who also went into the SEALs with a yoga and Zen meditation background and martial arts background, right? This is he was at the time what I consider to be, and still is, one of the most world-centric warriors that is, and he doesn't get nearly the recognition or the attention that he deserves, in my opinion. Other people who are maybe a little more flashy with their Navy SEAL background get way more, and doesn't matter who, but they get way more. The reality is a lot of this mind training work stems from him. That's where it comes from. And I like to go to the root, right?
Yeah.
And so that's where it started for us. And we both became unbeatable mind coaches. That was a part of our journey, went down and trained with them. They have all kinds of different types of camps, like you called it, right? Some are just physical. Other ones are more integrated again, physical, mental, emotional, intuitive, and spiritual. And this is what they call the 5 mountains. And so there's these 3-day retreats that you go across these 5 mountains and you do something physical, you do something mental and emotional, you do something that's more intuitive and spiritual, right? And you have this whole practice. Well, Colton, I was a part of their like higher end coaching client, right? I was in what's called, a couple of years ago, I was in what was called Tip of the Spear, where, I think I traveled 4 times in 1 year to California. And I was even taking my painting company down there with me, right? I was taking my leaders down with me to train, to do this same type of training, because I was teaching them what I was learning. And I was like, hey, I want you to go be exposed to Mark and their team and whatever.
Some of our employees' friends are like, what? You're going to train with Navy SEALs? I thought you worked for a painting company. What's going on? Right? Well, it's not just any company.
We're uncommon. We're uncommon with how we do things. And so my son started asking me for quite some time, Dad, I want to go. I'm like, you're not old enough. You're not old enough. Son.
He was 9, right?
He was 8 when he started asking me. And so I was with Mark and the group in Atlanta, Georgia for a training. And we were sitting at dinner and I was, and I say, hey, Mark, I got to ask you, like, just because I'm trying to be authentic as a father here, because I don't want to come back and lie to my son. And how would you feel if I brought my 9-year-old son to come train? He's like, normally I'd say no, but with knowing you and make sure he's ready and he's not a distraction to other people. As long as you feel like he's ready, then absolutely. I said, oh, okay. So I went home and I told her, all right, Colton, here's the deal, buddy. He said yes, and but this is what this means. For the next 3 months, you're trained every single day. Right. And if I'm going to take you down there and we're going to get put in these environments where we're doing these, what they call beach games. They used to call it beach tortures, but their insurance said you got to stop calling it beach tortures. For sure. Where they're in and out of the surf.
Well, and words are matter,
right? Yeah, in and out of the surf, and you're rolling in the sand. You got sandbags over your head, being Navy, they're doing what they do best is they break you down and build you up, right? They're going to push every single one of us to our breaking point, right? And then we're going to come back and we're going to journal about it. And we're going to do some, box breathing and some spiritual practices. And we're going to uncover different things, whatever. Anyway, so Colton committed to it. Every single day, a cold shower, every single day doing breathwork and meditation, learning what we call the continuum. And then once a week, we progressively got the ice bath colder and colder and colder and colder. And we developed a way of training the mind, what we now use as for our mental training, what we call BATA, breath, attention, decide, act, came from Colton going through that, because very quickly he was like, this is hard. I'm like, well, what'd you think it was going to be? Right. You know what I mean? So we started with 1 bag of ice and then 2 bags of ice and then 3 bags of ice. And the next thing you know, we were doing, 40, 38, 40 degree ice baths and dunking our head. And it's not just sitting in the ice bath. That's easy. What's difficult part is to actually dunk your head underneath and hold your breath underneath the water. That's when the game gets real, right? That's when the mind creates all kinds of chatter every single time, and that's the game, is to say, okay, put yourself in an environment where growth is the only option. And so this is part of the environment of growth, like taking on worthy challenges that you're going to, have to overcome yourself. Right. Yeah. And so the mind pops up and say, we, focus on our breath. Where's our attention? Let's bring it inward. Let's decide who we are. Let's act upon it. Let's go. That's what we call BATA. Yeah. And so he and I created that, and he was able to, over the course of weeks and months, we went down to California together, and I had one of my employees there with me. And, we went through the whole weekend, and by the end of it, I pulled the plug on the very last little bit, like last 10 or 15 minutes. I'm like, I can't take any more as a father. I'm done. And I pulled him out and said that we're done, and we pushed right to the breaking point, and he handled it incredibly well. He finished the ice bath. And so now we just have integrated into a part of our family, because the growth that we saw in him in that 3 months. And I told him, I don't know, hundreds of times, disclaimer, if anybody's listening and judging me, that I was like, you do not have to do this. You do not have to do this. You're loved. no matter
You
what.
also had him
It's a
going.
perfect example of how desire is causative, right? Sorry, Heidi, go ahead.
Oh,
Tell
yeah,
me
I
what
was
you were
gonna
going to say.
say, he also had him go into detail about why do you want to do this?
Yeah.
Because if you're wanting to do this to just prove to other people that you're tough or that you can do something, that's not the right reason. So he had him write out, what is my reason for doing this? And understanding the why behind why you're doing anything is going
Yeah.
to strengthen your resolve to stick with it. So I think that was an important point too.
Yeah, we did the old 5 why. You ask somebody
Mhm.
why, and then
Yeah.
why, and then why, and then why, and eventually you're like, oh, that's why you want to do it. Let's go.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, the depth gets there. Well, and how awesome, because in a way, Ryan, you had referred to going back to your, younger self. In a way, both of you are going back to your younger selves and making this impact, and helping your son and daughter learn some things that you in your mind are thinking, I wish I would have known that back then. So hats off to you. I think that's phenomenal. So
And they actually are loving it. They get to sit in when we do the competitive edge program, like with the swim team,
Yeah.
like they come to every single session with us and sit in with us and participate. And
Mhm.
oh, cool.
They're in the circle. They're not in the back of the room. They're in the circle with the teens
which I mean,
participating.
so we're dripping on them over and over and over, right? I'll be willing to bet that, by the time Colton's 14, 15, 16 years old, he'll be running those groups, right?
Yeah.
For youth, and he even has done that. He's even written a coaching program for like 8 to 10 year olds, right?
Wow. Yeah.
And he identified these different lessons that he'd want them to learn, that he learned from going through that challenge. And
Yeah.
And it was all his doing. Like I'm just going, okay, well then if you want me to coach you, this is what me coaching you looks like.
Yeah.
Right? When it gets hard, don't expect from me to yeah, absolutely, it's hard now. Now the training begins.
Yeah, that's so great. And I want to circle back as we kind of finish up around throughout this whole podcast. Like, I think we were talking about what's one thing that you really want people to know, and you were talking about self-awareness and self-growth, right? And it's so interesting because I didn't even have to bring it up because it's just such a part of what both of you do. And you both have different, when I say approaches, I don't mean like the content type of approach, but you both have different ways of kind of doing that. And what a phenomenal partnership to be able to go out and do that and making such a huge impact in the world. So thank you to both of you, Heidi and Ryan, for what you do in the world. And if someone's interested in hearing more about what you do, maybe following you, maybe even hiring you as coaches, where would you suggest to them to go? And I will say, don't worry about writing it down. We'll have it in the show notes.
Yeah. So our website is the best place, IHPcoaching.com. We have a podcast called Integrated Mindset Podcast, and it's the two of us on there just diving into these topics on growth. And we also have a community that you can find on the website as well. So
Perfect.
Yeah.
Perfect. Well, Heidi and Ryan, thank you so much. I know your time is valuable as well. And it's just so awesome to reconnect, and we'll have to go have dinner again here real soon. So
Yes.
Absolutely. Thank you for having us.
Thanks.
absolutely. And for those of you listening, if you would like to gain more clarity in what you want to do in your life, please reach out to me. The link is in the show notes at my website, and set up a 30-minute clarity call. No pressure, no sales, just a time for us to sit down. And I promise you'll be clearer at the end of that 30 minutes than you were at the beginning. So with that, it's a wrap, and we'll see you all next week. Thanks so much for listening. The song Ride is co-written and sung by Miss Jackie Wilson and her collaborators Tyler Banks, David DJ Lee, and Chris Renee. And a huge shout out to them for allowing us to use this perfect song. Everyone have a fabulous week, and I'll talk to you next week.